We've spent the last 15 weeks working through our 5 core values. So we've spent 3 weeks on each one. You probably noticed that if you've been around a little bit. And this is our last week together in the series for Fight for Joy. So we'll be closing up talking about joy here. And one of the most challenging times of life is in those moments where we have nothing to really look forward to. Nothing that we can look out and say, if I could just hold on to this, if I could just hang on until this happens, if I could just get to this moment, or maybe even better yet, I can hardly wait until this day. I can hardly wait until this event or this season, just something to look forward to. And when we don't have that, life tends to get stale and discouraging, even a little depressing. And the idea of having joy, fighting for joy in those moments is really a bit overwhelming, and it doesn't even seem possible. Last May, 12 months ago, my son graduated from college, and we were now operating on at that time, we would be operating on his schedule, because for the last 22 years, we would plan all of our summertime, family times together throughout the summer, trying to push it as late as possible. So we had that one last big hurrah before the kids had to go back to school. As he graduated from college last May, he was now at the mercy of his employer. You don't go to a new job interview, your very first job, and say, thank you for the offer, but here's the deal. I've got to go to vacation with my family in a couple of weeks, and I'll be good. You just say, thank you very much, and when can I take off? Like, how many more months until I've earned vacation? So we had to plan our vacation around him, and we chose to go the week after he graduated because he only had 2 weeks before he started his very first job. Things were great. We're thankful. We're not complaining about going on vacation, but we took our vacation right after Mother's Day last year, which was great. And we went to the beach, as most of the time we have done. We spent a week together, just the 4 of us. We came back, and as we were driving home, there was that overwhelming sense, not of the reckless love of God, but an overwhelming sense of, so this is it, like we're done. Like this was the trip. So when is Christmas break? Like we just began to look ahead because we had spent so many years going, if we could just hold on to that last week of July, first week of August, and anticipate the vacation. And then now we're at this season of life where the very first day officially when you get out of school, we're on vacation. And then we come back and we have the whole summer to go to work and the whole summer to go home and go to bed so we can get up and go to work. And everything just went down as far as excitement level in our home because we didn't have that thing to look forward to. And most of our life was, when do you have to go back to school? When does school begin again? When does this season start? And now it's just, hey, it's another Monday in June. Here we go. It's another Tuesday in July. It's all the same. And it's a challenge to have joy in those moments when life is so normal, routine, stale, and at other points of life even difficult and challenging, and at times even feeling insufferable. When there's nothing in front of us, I think I said sufferable, but I'm going to say sufferable. I don't know. I'm hungry. A little bit unsufferable. There are many times in our lives where we get to those points where we don't see the reward coming, and we don't feel like there's any relief coming from what we're going through. We're just kind of going through the motions. And then we read through Scripture, we open up God's Word and try to figure this thing out, and we see rejoice, 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 fight for joy, choose joy, have joy. And it just doesn't really seem to fit our lives. Well, thankfully, God's story is filled with people who were going through hard things and yet still chose to fight for their joy. You go back to the very first book of the Bible, and you've got this story about a man named Joseph, and he had, to say the least, family problems. Like, he did not have good relationships with his siblings to the point where they actually sold him and then told their dad that he was dead. It was an awful, awful deal. And yet through all of things he went through that ultimately would lead to a reunion in another country years and years later, he chose to fight for joy. You have the figurehead David that we've heard of, even if we don't know exactly what it's all about. He was the second king of Israel. David's anointed. He has God's favor on him. God chose him because he was a man after his own heart. And yet after he figures this out, he spends most of his time hiding and running and dodging arrows and living in caves, and it just doesn't really make sense. And yet through all of that, he's writing most of what we have in the book of Psalms, all these songs about God's hope and God's deliverance and God's rescue, even while he is going through it, not after it's over, but even in the middle of it. We've got Daniel, who had problems at work. You can go through and find many other prophets who struggled. There was a prophet named Hosea who had problems in his marriage. You have all sorts of these people who were going through hard stuff. There's a man named Paul in the New Testament, and he was constantly in jail as you're reading through the book of Acts. Like, just stay out of jail. Like, you'll do more for God's kingdom. He's constantly being arrested and thrown in and taken captive. And so you go over and over and over these stories and these people who had great struggles and yet still chose to fight for joy. Well, we're going to take a look into a book called 1 Peter today. And if you have a Bible with you or have the app open on your phone, 1 Peter is a little book in the New Testament that we're going to read. The one that wrote Peter was, give you a wild guess, Peter. It doesn't always work that way, but it does most of the time. Peter wrote this letter that we call 1 Peter, and he wrote it to some Christians, some people who were struggling and trying to find a way to hold on to their joy. And yet they were surrounded by authorities who were telling them to keep their faith quiet. Their faith wasn't welcome in that place. They've got Christian leaders inside their circles who are just making life difficult and taking advantage of them, leading them down the wrong paths and teaching them stuff that's not even true. And so they're having trust issues with what's going on in leadership. And then they're just going through normal temptation stuff. New followers of Jesus trying to not be the way they used to be, trying to not be the old guy again, trying to overcome all the stuff that trapped them and held them back along the way. It was just really hard, and it would have been easy, I would think, for Peter just to write and say, hey, just hang on, man. Just hold on. Just don't give up and you'll be fine. Just don't worry about joy. Don't worry about winning. It's too hard right now. Things are too difficult. Life is too messy. There's no real end in sight. This is just the way it's going to be for you. So just hang on. Just survive. But that's not what he said. In 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 12, he said, "Dear friends, don't be surprised when the fiery ordeal comes among you to test you, as if something unusual were happening to you. Instead, rejoice as you share in the sufferings of Christ." He said, you're going through some stuff, and it should not surprise you. If you thought everything was going to be easy and life was just going to be full of happiness and rainbows, like you just kind of missed it. This is going to be hard, this is going to be difficult, and you should have known it was coming. And instead of saying, so just hang on, deal with it, get through it, just try to have a smile on your face, just fake it till you make it, or any other phrase that we would understand. Instead, he said, rejoice as you share in the sufferings of Christ. As life is really, really hard, you choose joy. Realize that you are suffering just as Jesus suffered while he was here, and rejoice along the way. Now, every now and then in our lives, and maybe some of you are in it right now, every now and then in our lives, joy is a reaction. You get a new job, you get a promotion, you get a raise, you have a child, you have a grandchild, you get married. Like, there are just moments along the way where it's just natural to be full of joy. Things are good. But most of the time, for most of us, no matter how we post about it, no matter how we talk about it, no matter how we look on our faces, most of the time, joy is a difficult decision that has to be made. It's not just a reaction to things going well. It is a difficult decision. It's a choice. And while there is a reason at times to just smile and say life is good, usually we find ourselves in these moments where things are difficult and we're waiting and we don't have anything to really look forward to and say, it'll get easier when. We're just in the middle of it. And as a result, we don't have joy. And fighting for joy, we only hear about when we show up at the bridge and we hear this, we see the thing and we hear the guy talking about it, but it just doesn't really make sense. And it doesn't seem possible. Because why would someone ever choose joy in the middle of junk? Peter did not stop at that verse 13 when he said, rejoice as you share in the sufferings of Christ. He went on, and then the second part of that verse 13, he says, so that you may also rejoice with great joy when his glory is revealed. So twice, he said, rejoice that you're in it right now because you're suffering as Jesus suffered, so that you can rejoice with a bigger joy when his glory is revealed, something that's going to happen down the road. So he says, not just rejoice now that you're suffering, like, oh, thank God that I'm miserable right now. This is wonderful because now I know what it was like for Jesus. He said, rejoice now so that you can rejoice even more later when the reward or when the relief actually comes. So there's a now and a later thing happening. And so if I was going to put today's message just into a couple of phrases, joy is not ignoring what is happening. Joy is expecting what is coming. It's not ignoring the fact that life is hard, that we're going through junk right now. Not sticking your head in the sand and living in denial and saying, oh, it's fine, it's good, we're all good. We do that with each other all the time. How you doing? Well, I'm good. And we don't even stop to even think. And one, because it's kind of weird and rude to go, I'm not doing so well. Like that's just kind of kills everything because the person to ask you doesn't really want to stop and know why. It's just what you say. And we've gotten good at that. And that's not joy, just to deny something's going on. Joy is saying, this stinks, but I'm looking ahead at something different. And I'm looking ahead at what is coming. I'm expecting something more. I'm not just living in the now. I'm also realizing that something else is going to happen later. Now, before going too much further, I think we have to at least acknowledge the context of the letter. Because the letter is not just choose joy now and choose joy later. He said in verse 14, if you are ridiculed for the name of Christ, you are blessed, because the Spirit of glory and of God rests on you. Let none of you suffer as a murderer, a thief, an evildoer, or a meddler. But if anyone suffers as a Christian, let him not be ashamed, but let him glorify God in having that name. So Peter is talking to people, and with respect to joy, people who are living lives honorable to God, and yet still things don't seem to be working out. I'm doing the right thing. I'm just not feeling like I'm getting the results from that. He said, if you're suffering because of something you did, that's a whole different thing. So I just quickly want to help you grasp this. Not that it's hard to understand. I just think we overlook it at times. If I am a jerk and I run people off, I don't then stop in my prayer time and go, Lord, I don't know why you're testing me, allowing me to be so lonely and leaning on. The problem is I'm a jerk. The problem is not God's testing me in the junk. So there's a difference between the consequences of what I'm going through and difficult tests and trials that I will experience in life. If it's because of my own problems, it doesn't mean God's mad at me or angry with me or hates me. It just means the answer is I got to come home. There's division between God and me. I need to bring that together by me saying, God, this is on me. And I realize that, and I'm sorry, and I plead your blood, and just cover me. I want to do this thing better. That's a whole different thing. Peter is writing to people, and as I listed some of those people in the Old Testament before understanding what it would be to be a follower of Jesus, because they didn't know Jesus at that time and who he was and how he was going to come, but in the sense of trying to honorably live your life the way God calls you to live it. And when you're doing the right things and yet you're still struggling, and like some of these people in the past, you're doing the right thing, but your family is just a wreck. And you've prayed and you've prayed and you've prayed and nothing is putting it together. Or your marriage is just hanging on by a thread and you've prayed and just God's not answering the prayer. Or physically, your body's just falling apart. You're having all these things going on and you're trusting and believing and it's just not turning around for you. In those moments when we're stuck in the middle, Paul's saying, you rejoice now that you're suffering the way Jesus did, so that you can rejoice even bigger on the other side when all of this is over and his glory is revealed and you get to see him face to face. So when you're doing the right thing, but you're having the wrong experience, he says, have joy because you are now walking on the King's road. You're stepping in the footsteps of Jesus. Why is that significant? He said, you participate in the sufferings of Christ. Well, if Jesus' road stopped at the cross, it would be very discouraging, because then our whole life is just, well, another bad thing happened, and another prayer not being answered, another trip to the doctor, and another bad diagnosis, and another friend leaves me, and another dollar I can't save. And that's a terrible way to live. But Jesus' road did not stop at the cross. He stopped and paid a price and then stepped into glory. He was resurrected and ultimately sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. That's a different story than just he went and he died, and we're suffering with Christ. And just as that story continued to go on, our stories don't end with the suffering. There is something on the other side that God is going to bless us with, and it may be not until we see him face to face. It may also be here in this life as well. But we go through hard stuff as Jesus went through hard stuff. But Jesus also made it through to the other side. So much so that a couple of weeks ago, as we were working through Hebrews, we read that Jesus, for the joy set before him, endured the cross, scorning its shame, and was seated at the right hand of the throne of God. So when Jesus is facing the hard part of the journey, he fixed his eyes on what was ahead, and we're now to fix our eyes on him as we're going through it. So he looked ahead and saw the joy of what was going to take place after he completed his task. And you and I, as we're going through it, he says, should fix our eyes on the joy of what it is that Jesus experienced as well. He said, well, we're not going to be sitting at the right hand of the throne of God. When all is said and done, I'm not going to go to heaven and God go right here, right hand. Here you go. Here's your throne. That's not the way it's going to work. I don't even think there are thrones there. But anyway, that's not how it's going to work. We're not going to have that same kind of experience. So what is that going to be for us? Well, Peter wrote these words in chapter 1. He said, praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. In his great mercy, he has given us new birth into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, and into an inheritance that can never perish, spoil, or fade. This inheritance is kept in heaven for you, who through faith are shielded by God's power until the coming of the salvation that is ready to be revealed in the last time. In all this you greatly rejoice, though now for a little while you may have had to suffer grief and all kinds of trials. These have come so that the proven genuineness of your faith, of greater worth than gold, which perishes even though refined by fire, may result in praise, glory, and honor when Jesus Christ is revealed. Though you have not seen him, you love him, and even though you do not see him now, you believe in him and are filled with an inexpressible and glorious joy. For you are receiving the end result of your faith, this salvation of your souls. He said, we're looking ahead as he looked ahead. And he said, as a result, you are now filled with inexpressible and glorious joy. And I wish I had a mirror up here so you could see the inexpressible and glorious joy on your faces right now. Like you are feeling it. You are experiencing it. Even right now, some of you say, I refuse to smile. I will not smile at this. Inexpressible, glorious joy is how we are to live now, not because of now, but because of later. I don't thank God for any of the junk that I experience or have experienced, but I thank God for how he worked it out for good because I trusted him and leaned on him. Not everything happens according to God's perfect plan. Most of us have heard along the way the phrase, everything happens for a reason. And anytime something happens that makes us mad or sad, we quote that, which is not a verse. It's just something someone's grandmother said that sounded really, really good at the time. That's not what it says. But God can work everything together for good. I don't thank God for my friends who've gone through divorce, but I'm thankful that he's shown himself faithful and been there with them through all the hard stuff. I'm not thankful that people die way too young. I'm not thankful for diagnoses that shake us to our core. I'm not thankful for any of those things. I'm not thankful for job losses or any of those moments, but I am so thankful that God is so faithful that he would be willing to walk with us and see us through those moments. You having joy in your junk doesn't mean you're stopping and saying, God, thank you for this terrible day that I've had. I will rejoice and be glad. It's saying, God, I am not happy about this, but I know you're not finished. And I'm looking ahead, and I'm going to choose joy now because I know this isn't where it ends. I don't know how tomorrow is going to be. I don't know how it's going to be a decade from now, but I know it does not end here. And so I'm going to choose joy in this moment. And if you and I are going to experience what Peter is talking about here, I think there are some fundamental questions that we have to answer that Peter worked through himself very quickly. And these are very elementary questions. But one, you just have to decide for yourself, does God care? Does God actually care about me? And from Peter's perspective, as he's writing to these Christians and trying to encourage them to choose joy, he's coming from an understanding that he believes in his heart of hearts that God does care. He remembers a moment when he was just working as a fisherman with no plans to do anything else other than make money, catch fish so he could make more money. That was it. And Jesus showed up and said, hey, you in the boat, come here. I've got something bigger for you. I'm just a fisherman. I don't know what you're talking about. No, I've got something bigger. You're going to fish for men. You're going to change lives. Follow me. He understood God's care and concern for him. When he, the one that was closest to Jesus, made one of the biggest mistakes of his life and looked at people and said, I don't know that Jesus guy. He starts cussing and screaming, going, get out of here. I don't know that guy. And then reality hit him. He just turned his back on his Savior and best friend. He eventually saw that Savior and best friend face to face, and Jesus came up and said, do you love me still? Yeah. Well, then let's continue. Let's get back. And he asked him 2 more times, do you love me? He just said, get back to work, man. You and I are okay. We're done. I forgive you. Move on. But you have to decide for yourself, does God really care about me? Not does he care, but does he care about me? Peter was convinced. Secondly, is God aware? Does he actually know what's going on? There are billions of people around here. Why is he paying any attention to me? People in my own town don't pay attention to me. Why would God in heaven pay attention to me? I'm an unknown. I'm a nobody. And yet Peter remembers all those moments along the way where God showed up and looked back at the disciples and said, what are you talking about? They said, who? What? Us? He said, I already know what your thoughts are. So let me answer this. He understood that God was supremely aware of what was going on. We even have in Matthew's gospel that Jesus told them, even the hairs of your head are numbered by your Father. Don't think for a moment that there's any part of you not valuable enough to pay attention to. But you've got to decide if he's aware of what's going on in your life, if he knows what you're going through, what your struggle is. And then the third very simple question is God able? Does he care? Is he aware? And is he able? Can he fix this situation? Can he work through this? And as Peter's writing to Christians who were wondering, is God really able to do this? Can he turn this thing around? Like he's started this church and put us in the middle of a country that doesn't even want us here. People are being killed because of what they believe, and he wants us to. Can God fix this? And Peter's writing going, I was the first one to the tomb. Like I'm telling you, everything is different. There was a day when I thought things were over. I went to the tomb. John and I saw Dolan was there, and then we ran back and told everybody, put all your dreams back on the table, boys, because he can do everything. Like he said he could. I wasn't sure. Now I know he is able. So don't think for a second that he can't put back together whatever it is that has taken the joy from you. Your relationship that's fallen apart, your health concerns, whatever they may be, your financial worries, your loneliness. God is able to handle that. And you've got to decide for yourself if you believe that. Peter was well aware of it, so now he's writing a letter to a bunch of people who were struggling, saying, God has got this. You hang on. You take joy now because the story's not over, because in the end, you're going to have even bigger joy when you see the reveal of what God is doing. Now, I mentioned a few people earlier, Daniel, Joseph, and others who went along the way and had to fight for their joy in hard times. I left out the most obvious, and his name was Job, or if you're new to the Bible, you probably called him Job. But either way, Job, And Job went through it. And Job was experiencing stuff that he didn't understand. He just knew that he had a great marriage, had great kids, he had a huge farm, he was incredibly wealthy, and he was respected in the city. Behind the scenes, the enemy went to God and said, that Job of yours, the only reason he's so faithful to you is because you keep blessing him like nuts. You've given him money, you've given him family, you've given him wealth, you got all the stuff. And God said, that's not true. In fact, if you want to, take it all away and I'll show you. Job's a good man. And one by one, the enemy started taking everything. Took away his respect, took away the respect his wife had for him. At one point, she even told him, why don't you just curse your God and die? Get this thing over with. Lost his kids tragically, lost his farm literally, lost everything that he had. His health fell apart, sores all over his body, can't stop itching. We even found out that he has bad breath, like chronic bad breath, which may be the worst of all health things you can go through. Like no one even wants to be near you because you just stink every time you open your mouth. He was going through it. And he had some friends that showed up and said, Job, man, what's your little secret sin going on? Something's happening. Good thing or bad things like that don't happen to good people. What is really going on? He said, man, I don't know. I haven't done anything. He said, something's going on. And then we have this moment in Job chapter 19 where Job stood up as if to say, I've had enough. And he told the friends, listen, I've told you everything. I don't know why I'm going through all this junk, but here's what I do know. And Job's words were, I know that my Redeemer lives. And when all of this flesh, all this skin and bones is gone, and it's basically on its way out now, when that thing happens, I know that in that moment, I will see God face to face. Myself, I will see him. In that moment, he's looking ahead and saying, I am going to have joy if it kills me right now, which it is. It's going to kill me right now, not because I'm thankful for what I'm going through, but because I know that it's not over and God is not finished with this. Now, what Job didn't know was that he would find relief and there would be a reward and God would actually return everything that was taken from him and more. He was richer on the other side in the second chapter of his life than he was before. And God gave him another family and he was able to begin again. And it was kind of an awesome thing. But before he knew that was happening, he stopped and said, I know my Redeemer lives. And in the end, he's going to reward. He's going to be my reward and he is going to see me through.